from the beginning, we've said you see a picture of every site and every amenity, and we haven't varied from that. That's why our tours are comprised of hundreds of photos put together and linked to an interactive map, just because we want to tell the whole story. We don't want to leave anything out.
Welcome to the RV Entrepreneur Podcast, the weekly show for nomads, work campers, RVers, and entrepreneurs looking to earn a living or build a business while enjoying the RV lifestyle. This week's host is Glenn Willard. Let's settle in and enjoy the RV Entrepreneur Podcast, brought to you by RV Life.
Hello, friends, and welcome to the RV Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm Glenn Willard, your host this week, and today I have the honor of speaking with Jen and TJ Emmond. In 2020, they had an epiphany when trying to book campsites online because, let's face it, the current system could use some real improvement. So they started Campsite360 to create an immersive experience with each campsite for the user and improve the booking numbers for the campground owners. They hit the road full-time in 2022 with their 3 kids to scale their rapidly growing business. But before we explore their journey, here's a quick word from our sponsor.
Ever found yourself lost in the middle of nowhere with no signal? With the RV Life app, that's a thing of the past. Enjoy reliable offline navigation, lane guidance, and turn-by-turn voice directions, ensuring you're always on the right path. Navigate the open road with ease and confidence. Visit RVLife.com to download the app today and start exploring without limits.
Jen and TJ, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
You are very welcome. I'm excited to be talking to both of you because I think what you've put together and the epiphany that you had back when you decided to start this business was freaking brilliant.
Thank
you. You're staying way ahead of the curve. So before we even get into this, I do want to know, how did you get into the RV life?
So before COVID happened, beginning of January of 2020, we went to an RV show and we found a travel trailer, fell in love with it, put an order in for it, and then 2 months later, COVID hits. And we weren't even sure if we were actually going to still pick up the travel trailer because times were so uncertain. But we did. We picked it up in May. And that whole first year, we went camping almost every weekend.
There was nothing else to do at that point, so we decided to jump all in.
Yeah, suddenly our schedules were wide open and we had time to go out and camp each weekend, and we fell in love with it.
Beautiful. Wait, were the campgrounds still open, or did you end up boondocking more often?
No, so we're from Ohio, so the available boondocking options and us having just bought our first RV, we ended up going to the campgrounds once they did open. So okay. I think it was later in the summer when we started. What the other thing was too is during that whole time frame, our third daughter was born a week before all the COVID lockdowns. So we had a newborn baby that we were camping with during COVID, and we just needed to get out of the house. So anywhere that had a playground was fine enough for us then. Beautiful.
I can't think of a better way to isolate. And,
yeah,
that's exactly what we did. We ended up boondocking the entire time through COVID, and it was wonderful. What a great way to stay away from everyone else. So before you did this, obviously you became remote once COVID hit. What did you guys do before this business took over everything?
We started the business in October of 2020. So at the end of our first camping season, we thought of the idea for starting Campsite360. And that's when we started the business. And we started the business when we both had full-time jobs. I was a teacher for 5th and 6th grade math for the past 12 years. And TJ worked in sales.
Yeah, so I worked at a couple companies. I did sales, and then I also did some of my own consulting beforehand. So I was already working remotely when all of this happened, which actually gave me the opportunity, as Jen was a teacher. She's busy all day long. To be able to split my time between starting Campsite360 and working on the contracts I did have.
Perfect. So Jen, did you continue to teach during COVID via, how did that work?
Yes. In 2021, I taught completely online remotely. But most of my colleagues were back in person, wearing masks and things. But I did the online teaching world for that whole year. And then the year after that, I was back in the classroom. And then the year after that, we decided to hit the road.
Beautiful. So now both of you are running this business, Campsite360, period. Nothing else, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Wonderful. You did the absolute right thing. When you start a business, don't quit your other job until you've got some revenue stream that can pay the bills. Yes. So you travel with 3 kids and you run this business. How do they work into the equation?
Right now with their ages, it's by proximity. I mean, they know when we're going to campgrounds to work. They know kind of how mom and dad run the business. They know I go into the room and I do my work. And half of the time I'll be making calls or doing things and they're playing around my feet. So it's funny because our 2 youngest, who are 7 and 4, well, will be 5, they both know if daddy's on the phone, they have to whisper and they have to. So like, while they're not involved in the business, they're constantly absorbing what we're doing on a daily basis.
Beautiful. They won't forget that either.
No.
These are lessons that every, school child should learn, was the entrepreneurial skill sets that are often not taught in schools. And I can tell you honestly, when we ran our business, our boys were the ages that yours are now, and they came to the business all the time. They were involved with clientele. They saw their customers. They interacted. They understood how money changed hands. It was lessons that will never be forgotten. So I hope that your daughters pick up that same lesson from you. Do you think they'll maybe pick up a camera or start being part of the business?
I think eventually. It's something I don't want to force on them, right? Like, I don't want to feel like we made them do it. But we try to incorporate them. Like, I've gone out on just stop-ins to campgrounds and taken our oldest daughter and had her just walk in with me as I'm starting up a conversation with somebody at the front desk and things like that. So there's things we incorporate them into, but I never force them to do it. But I do think they'll eventually be more involved.
And they've gone to trade shows with us and they sit at the booth and they see customers come up and we talk to them about virtual tours. And yeah, I think they're learning so much more than we can imagine.
Exactly. We can tell them the things that we want to tell them, but they learn through observation. And I have a feeling that your daughters will be entrepreneurs, all 3 of them, just because you guys are taking off. So
we joke that whatever they come to tell us they're going to do after high school, we just kind of have to say yes to. Like, we decided to go start our own business and move into an RV and travel the country and do something really crazy that's not normal. So we're conditioning ourselves right now for whatever we're instilling in them now. We have to just accept later as this is what we brought them up doing.
Exactly. So nothing will be off the table. Good for you. Right. And that's very open-minded. And I guess, Jen, you're in charge of all the math curriculum?
Yep. All the curriculum now.
All the curriculum. Okay.
Yes.
Good deal. Next, I want to talk about like the logistics of, you contact campgrounds and you get them to be interested in your product. How do you handle the logistics of moving around the country? You've got 3 daughters. You've got a lot on the table. How do you order what campgrounds you're going to visit and what accounts you're going to try and sell?
Well, for our first year and a half, we based our travel plan specifically on campgrounds that we had sold to. So we kind of told them, we're going to be here during this month, the second week, and that's when we're going to film your park and we're going to stay with you. And then we would move on from there to the next project. Since then, I guess just within the last year, we have been traveling more at our own schedule because we now use local photographers to capture the footage that we need on the ground, and then they send it to us remotely.
Beautiful. That almost segues into another question I have down the line is, you're outsourcing some of your work now. And
we are.
Or are these employees or are they contractors?
No, so we only work with contractors right now. So we use local photography because we realized very quickly we can't be in all places at once. So there's got to be a way to scale this. And there's photographers all over the place, right? So why not leverage their local presence and feed them some business too, to help us out and get the content that we need. So that's where in the last 12 months, we've now finally started building our own schedule to go travel to the places we want to see. So not every stop is us for work anymore. So
what a relief.
Yeah, so that's been nice. I mean, I still do a lot of the sales stuff where I'll go talk to campgrounds that are in the area and do those things. But from a filming standpoint, it's more we go try to sell where we're staying at, and then we'll film that while we're there. But anywhere else, we'll find somebody locally that we can depend on to help us film that.
Beautiful. And one of the previous podcast episodes with Josh, you mentioned that you had to learn a lot as you were going. I mean, anyone in business, if you're an entrepreneur and you're wearing all hats, there are so many lessons to learn as you progress through the experience. Are you still learning every day, or do you feel like you have some systems down that are running themselves?
Yes, we're still learning every day.
Every single day. We have systems, but I mean, there's always a new system, right? So when we quit filming ourselves and said we were going to go ahead and use local photographers, that was a whole new learning process, right? How do we onboard them? How do we qualify them? How do we find them? How do we make sure they have the right equipment that we need? So then once we got those processes and things figured out, it's on to something new, right? So it's continually learning. And I'll say that's been one of the things I've liked the most about the entrepreneurial journey is in previous careers, I tended to get like burnout on doing the same thing over and over again, where this is keeping me on my toes at all times. And it's always new and always fresh, which helps me to stay engaged and focused and really keeps the motivation going as I don't know everything. And every time I come up against an issue, I have to relearn something.
TJ, you just made a great point that every entrepreneur should state to themselves every day. I don't know everything.
Yes.
And I think that what you just stated, it's funny because I was going to ask that question later. What does it mean to you to be an entrepreneur? But that constant learning something new and another challenge the next day, because becoming stagnant in a normal career is, I don't know, it's life sucking.
Yeah, it is.
So, okay, how do you find local photographers throughout the country once you've found an account?
Well, sometimes the campground that buys the virtual tour will say, I've worked with this photographer in the past. I would love for you to give them the first shot. And then we go with them. And it turns out to be a great relationship. And if they don't have someone that they already recommend or work with, then we use Google Maps to figure out who is close within the area, check out their websites, give them calls, and go back and forth. And they give us a bid, and then we figure out who's the best from there.
And as we're looking for people, we're looking for photographers that kind of understand virtual tours, right? A lot of them have either done it from a real estate or commercial standpoint. And so really the qualifications, are you familiar with filming virtual tours, right? So where can we get a pool of people with that? But there's several websites that we use, like Google, they used to have their certified photographer program. And there's still places people you can find on there that we use that used to do virtual tours for Google Street View.
Wow. I didn't even know that was a Google certified photographer. That's cool. So very cool.
And funny enough, there's some places that are so remote that the closest person we can find is within 2 hours. So we call them and we say, are you willing to make a 2-hour drive to go get pictures of this campground? And some of them are totally up for it.
Right.
So it can be challenging depending where it's at in the country.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. I mean, again, one of those new things that you have to learn and create the system for. Sure. So, Jen, are you participating as much in the business as TJ because you're also handling the homeschooling?
Well, homeschooling is my primary job. And then I also help with social media and the finances. And then I help to schedule some of the meetings and make sure that we get where we need to go
She's the logistics
on the right day.
She is all
that's a
of
yes.
the business logistics.
Yes.
That is a yes. It sounds like there's an equal distribution here almost.
There is.
That is a very big job. Yes.
Well,
yes.
And I joke the most important part that she keeps us all alive, because if it were up to me to schedule where we're going to stay, do the research on the parks and the route planning, and do social media and teach the kids, and like the amount of stuff she does far outweighs what I do in the business, because she keeps all of us alive and functioning. And
wow, TJ, that is exactly what I used to say when we were in business, because, once my two boys were born, my wife stepped out of the business. She was still 50% owner, and she was just, the stay-at-home mom. And everyone was like, well, what does she do? I'm like, well, she's the one who actually works. I'm the one who just runs the business. She's the one who actually works. So I completely get that.
Yep.
This episode is made possible by Travelify. Want reliable internet without the hassle? Meet Travelify. It's portable, high-speed Wi-Fi that's ready to go wherever you are. From road trips to remote cabins. No tricky setup or permanent location required. Just plug in and you're connected. And here's the best part. No contracts, no commitments, and no reactivation fees. Pay only for the months you need. Travelify connects to the strongest available signal among multiple major networks, so you stay online with confidence, backed by a US-based support team that knows the outdoor lifestyle. Travelify, simplifying internet while you travel. Visit travelify.com today. That's TRAVLFI.com. Listeners can save 15% with code RVE at checkout.
Speaking of cameras and capturing the 360 view of campgrounds, again, of sites themselves is beautiful. What type of equipment are you using for this? I know it's newer technology.
Yeah, so we're using primarily we use Insta360 cameras. They're easy enough to get, and I mean the technology advances they've made in them in the recent years are crazy. It seems like every 9 months they're coming out with something new. So we've iterated through several different types of cameras, and Insta360s seem to be the best interface, and they have the best filming for what we need.
Fantastic. Now, it's filming in 2D 360, not 3D, correct?
That's correct. So we did some in 3D. There's just not the customer demand for us to go that route right now, right? So eventually that might happen, but right now there's not enough people using VR headsets to really make a difference with the 3D in our user base.
What do you feel like that's coming? I mean, I just bought 2 VR headsets for my boys, and they spend almost half the day on them now. So
I do. The biggest issue we run into with that though is the equipment is 7 or 8 times the cost to get. So right now, with the cost of filming 2D or 3D photography, and then the time to edit it and build it, it just doesn't make sense right now for us to have all of that type of equipment. Plus, with us traveling in an RV, we try to travel with numerous different cameras. And those get really heavy really quickly. And to ship that out to somebody and have it break and then get back could just be a logistics nightmare.
Ensuring $30,000 of shipment is not worth it. And I completely understand. And by the time that VR becomes the norm, I think you will have grown enough that someone else is going to be handling that project.
I agree with that.
Beautiful. I've often thought, though, that there is a future and the fully immersive 360 tour of businesses. And I don't think, like you, there are too many companies out there doing that, where, just like local SEO, where someone can walk into a restaurant in their headset and choose the table that they might want to reserve. I feel like that's coming. So you guys are way ahead of the curve.
I think there's a lot of changes that's going to be happening, especially with, it started a while ago, but with the metaverse and all those things, right? Like that was the pre-ideas that really didn't take off as much as everybody thought. But it's coming. Google's already indexing the entire world with 360 imagery.
Exactly.
So it's a matter of time, but it's a matter of adoption too, right? What technologies are adopted, how is it adopted, and how does that translate to business revenue?
Exactly. So when you are going through a campground, how do you index? Because I went through your site. I love your site, by the way. It's so user friendly. It's
Thank you.
pretty. I love that you've empowered the campground owner rather than turning this into like a membership type thing where the campground owner can actually have the footage and it's part of their website. That's brilliant on your part. You've got to give to get in this business, and the consumer doesn't feel the impact of that rather than, the campground actually feels the impact. So kudos to you guys for doing that. So when you're actually going through the campground, and I'm thinking of this as I'm going through the site, how do you keep track of every site number while you're filming? Because, okay, so you're filming along whatever road it is. You've got B9, B8, B7, and then you're labeling them. How do you keep track of where everything is?
So you remember when we talked about continued learning? That
Yes.
was 2.5 years in the building of how to do this.
My favorite was in the very beginning when we would talk to ourselves while we're holding this camera above our head, walking down the campground roads, saying the site numbers out loud. So we would know when we watched the footage back, which site was which.
Yeah.
We've moved on since then.
We've had a lot of ideas. I mean, there were times where I thought about having a board that would tell us what site number we're sitting at, or the crazy ideas that we had for how do we, because that's been the most challenging part, right? The filming itself is relatively simple, right? I could almost train anybody to do any of the filming. It's point and shoot. It's pretty simple, but knowing where you're at, what campsite you're looking at, which side of the road it's on. So we've actually come up with a huge indexing system that we use in order to track where images are, what sites we're filming across from, what's around us, and all of that. So we had to come up with this big, long system in order to accurately track all of this stuff, because the next challenge is how do you maintain it, right? So as parks expand or change, or they change site types, if you don't have it indexed correctly, how do I know which pictures to switch out, right? How do I know what parts of the park that I need to interchange and make sure I have the right images? So it was a multi-year learning process. And honestly, the first 2 years of us being on the road, 1.5 years, was that. The goal was for us to film. We weren't going to grow quickly, knowing that we can't be everywhere. But we had to build this system of what do you do on site to keep track of it? How do you, in post, know where everything's at? How do you properly label everything? And that was the 2 years of us traveling park to park to go film, was building this type of process so that way we could scale.
Wow. And I believe that it took you all 2 years to perfect that because, from the user interface, from my perspective, it looks great. This is brilliantly done. So you have achieved what you need to achieve. And I'm wondering is it just as easy when you've outsourced the photography to someone else?
No, because the photographer is not the one taking the pictures out of the video or editing the photos. And that's not the same person that's building the tour and putting all those pictures together like a puzzle. And him and I have never been there because we're not traveling to the park.
Right.
And so there's lots of people in the process and they all know bits and pieces and we need it to come together. And
so, yeah. And to that point, when we did, for the first few years of the business, every park that we filmed, we were at. So if I had a question, I remembered being there and seeing this, or if I got lost in an intersection, I could recall being there and where I walked and what I did and how I navigated it. The challenge is now, how do I do that for a park I've never seen before, right? And do it in an unfolded 360 image, because a lot of the times when we're looking at these images, they're flat on a computer screen. They're not rounded in a circle like they are when we compile everything together. So not only is it being able to understand the footage, but also to see it distorted and in a flat pane of view, instead of wrapped around in a sphere like a 360 typically is within a virtual tour.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So that
incredible.
was a 2-year learning process.
Yes. And okay, so what are you using to edit this now that you've got these flat images and someone else is doing it? Who's doing the editing and what are you using?
So we have contractors that we're working with that help us on building the tours and editing the photos. So again, we typically use Photoshop, Affinity Photos, another platform, just depending what we need to do, because Photoshop's really great for photo editing wise. But if you ever need to level a panorama, like the horizon's off, which happens at times because the internals aren't exactly right, so you can have a tilted 360. So we have to use other platforms to level those out. So there's a lot of different editing softwares we use. But primarily it's the Adobe suite that we use for any of the editing.
Which is top tiered, period. So,
and it's super simple to use. I mean, if I need to train anybody on it, there's plenty of videos on how to use Photoshop and anything else we're going to use, Media Encoder, all of those. So there's less training I have to put together because there's a lot of resources available. For sure.
Yeah, wow. And okay, you're outsourcing so much of that work as well. I mean, the picture you're painting for me is that you guys are already in a scaling state of business.
That's where we're at now. So this is the year kind of we had targeted to where we feel comfortable enough to scale. So last year we used exclusively local photographers. We had very few issues with the processes we put together and the trainings we did. So we're fairly comfortable with, the processes and what we need to do in order to handle, the bigger workloads now. So that was always the goal. I never wanted to build the business and grow it too quickly that we sacrificed what we built it for, which was to help RVers like us find the right campsites that they're going to purchase. Right. So figuring all of those things out ahead of time, I felt was going to set us up better for when we reached the point of starting to scale.
Exactly. And, if you maintain that mindset of you are doing this to help the RVers, not to grow a business, then you will forever be successful as long as you maintain that. I know that for sure. So, and it sounds like you've kept that close to your heart, both of you. So
it's hard not to when we want to see it at every park we book every week. So it keeps it going, right?
Seriously. I mean, we almost always boondock, but when we do stay at parks, I wish it had always been available.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
Again, brilliant. So in the past, you attended a lot of trade shows for campground owners. Are you still doing that and marketing the same way, or has your marketing changed as you've grown?
I would say we primarily get most of our customers from trade shows. People we get to talk to at the booth, and then we can grab their contact information and continue the conversation from there.
So, but it has shifted too, because we're focusing more on our social media aspect of it as well. We're getting to a point where, we're starting to integrate to the reservation softwares, right? So being able to drive more traffic for our clients.
You just jumped a few ahead.
I did. I jumped ahead a little bit, but so that's where our marketing is shifting. Is we're now focusing a little more on our social media side, because we want to help drive traffic to our campgrounds, that we're partnered with. So back to us branding everything and integrating it to the park. The whole goal is to drive more people to your website and to convert more reservations, right? So now we're leaning into the social media side of that to try to drive more traffic to those clients. So it is shifting, but primarily we do still attend a lot of RV shows, or not RV shows, they're RV owner shows that happen throughout the country. We'll be doing several this spring. And that I would say is primarily where we get a lot of face-to-face time, but a lot of the marketing and sales aspect of it still is cold outreach and making phone calls every day.
If you're not willing to do that, you will not be successful.
I agree.
You just have to. You gotta hit the pavement. Or at the trade shows, do you guys have your own booth, or do you divide and conquer and have a booth and then hit every other booth?
So we have a booth, because at these campground owner trade shows, it's all vendors, right? So it might be somebody who's doing mobile apps for campgrounds, or they sell water treatment. So it's all vendors that are selling to the campground owners. So we have a booth there. And then the owners walk around the expo hall and talk with the vendors.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. And, I should have already figured that one out, but here we are.
Well, and we do, like, we just did the Tampa RV show where, there's like 70 campgrounds that have booths there. So we reverse the script on that when we can. And then we do go get to walk around to the booths and talk to the people that are there. So we don't do many of those shows just because we're not in a lot of the areas. But whenever we're here in Florida, we do the Tampa RV show.
Why not? So when you do walk around a show like that, between several years ago and today, how many people say, hey, I've seen your website, I've heard of you? Is it becoming more common?
Much more common.
Yeah, I remember in the very beginning, our very first trade show, we were the ones educating the campground owners on what is a virtual tour, what is a 360 picture. And that was just 4 years ago.
Right.
And now the conversation is, I know what a virtual tour is. Yes, I'm interested. Let me get your contact information, or where do we go from here, or tell me more about pricing. And yes, the conversation has completely changed.
Yeah, drastically changed. I mean, there was a lot of our sales process was just education that, no, the YouTube video you have on your webpage is not a virtual tour. That's not what we're talking about. So there was 2 years again from 2020 to 2022 where I felt like I was just teaching everybody else what a virtual tour actually was, which I think helped my understanding of how to sell this to them, right? So how do you position it? How do you market it? And where does it fit? But now, yeah, we walked around Tampa RV show a couple weeks ago, and it's not a question of what is that. It's do you have one yet, right? Or are you going to implement this at some point?
Exactly. And perfect niche too. I mean, a niche where you get to experience the love of RVing and camping at the same time that you're selling the business around it. And I mean, I suppose you could do bowling alleys instead. And I mean, how many games can you bowl before you're bored with it? But
right.
So I think you picked a fantastic niche. Are customers able to book? So what happens? They go on to, we'll call it Campground A. They go on to Campground A's website that has your services, and then they're able to look around. So they book directly through that campground's website. There's no booking software on yours.
So yeah, so the way it works now is there's booking softwares that are on the campground website, and then our virtual tours are on the website as well. So there's two different aspects. Right. Essentially, we're the research window. We show all the parks. We have all the sites. We have all the pictures. And then when they're ready, they go over to the reservation system to make that booking.
Got it.
What we saw early on was through our analytics that we would see guests go through the whole park. Right. They'd look at 80% of the pictures in a tour. Then they leave and they'd come back and check 5 or 6 individual sites. So we knew they were leaving to go look what's available. And then what does that site look like? Right. So they're comparing availability to the site pictures. So we're just releasing, and depending when this actually goes live, we'll have our first client who's on with our first reservation integration, where when they go into the tour or within our interactive map, they'll be able to see any of the site availability right from there. So they'll be able to do their own search by dates of stay, length, and type of site. And then when they go into the tour, there'll be a green book button underneath any of the site numbers that are available. And when they see the site they want, they can click on there and make the reservation directly through the virtual tour. So it eliminates the whole step of going back and forth and comparing what's available versus what does that site look like and which one do I want more.
But again, keeping the booking process on the campground's website is our goal.
Okay. But still, you are building the future. Because for the user, it is getting easier. Everything you're telling me, that it gets easier and easier for the user. The less times they have to jump around, the better. The more you can keep them on your site or the campground site, the better. Right. So
exactly.
Fantastic.
And it's there, we're kind of giving the guest the first time that they can actually see the product they're purchasing, if they're booking a specific site. now you can go in and see, is there a dumpster across from that? How close is it to the playground? Where do I go? So we're really giving the guest the insight into, this is what to expect when you arrive, and this is the site you're going to get, and this is exactly how it looks. It might not be the best site in the park, right? It might be back in a corner next to the maintenance building, but they know that before they get there. So there's no issues because you've been fully educated on your site before you got there.
And that's what our customers tell us. They say, we use this virtual tour in the office to help answer questions about site-specific things and just how much they see it helpful for their staff and for the guest.
You've proactively eliminated complaints.
That's we didn't know we were doing that, but yes, we've proactively helped reviews.
And name of the game right there, reviews. Wow. Okay, so it's been a while now. Do you have analytics from some of the campground owners that say, okay, in the past I had X number of bookings based on my website. Now I have, X more because of your software?
We have anecdotal stories of that, but I don't have anything concrete to share because we didn't have the integration with reservation systems that gave us those conversions. Okay. So that's part of the goal with these integrations, is to better track what do tours convert, right? So if you get a guest on your website, how many of those convert versus if somebody goes into a virtual tour, what's the conversion rate there? So as we continue to build our integrations and we integrate with more of these softwares, we're going to have a lot better data on conversion rates and things like that. So that's kind of the goal with all of this, was to be able to better harness all that data.
And that data it will be crucial for the sales process several years from now, especially as competition comes up. Is there any competition right now?
So there's a few that focus primarily on campgrounds. There's a lot of people that do virtual tours locally, right? But from a campground perspective, there's not many that do as comprehensive as coverage as we do.
From the beginning, we've said you see a picture of every site and every amenity, and we haven't varied from that. That's why our tours are comprised of hundreds of photos put together and linked to an interactive map, just because we want to tell the whole story. We don't want to leave anything out.
This episode is made possible by Travelfy. Want reliable internet without the hassle? Meet Travelfy. It's portable, high-speed Wi-Fi that's ready to go wherever you are. From road trips to remote cabins. No tricky setup or permanent location required. Just plug in and you're connected. And here's the best part. No contracts, no commitments, and no reactivation fees. Pay only for the months you need. Travelfy connects to the strongest available signal among multiple major networks, so you stay online with confidence, backed by a US-based support team that knows the outdoor lifestyle. Travelfy, simplifying internet while you travel. Visit travelfy.com today. That's TRAVLFI.com. Listeners can save 15% with code RVE at checkout.
I love that. We want to tell the whole story. Good. Again, you are thinking of the consumer, period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's one of my biggest complaints is when, a campground has all these phenomenal pictures on their website and you pull in and 10 of the sites look like that. The other 90 don't, right? So that's the goal. I mean, you may not want to show every site, but not every camper expects a campground to have a 10 out of 10 site for every site that they have on the park, right? We understand there's variances, and let's be honest, we've all booked poor campsites and not, thought it was the best when we showed up. But that may not have been because of the site, but it's because of the expectation you had built up in your head, right? So you booked this, you made this reservation, you expected one thing, and when you showed up, it was different. It doesn't mean it was bad, but it varied from what you had the bar set at, and that causes a lot of problems.
Yeah, that's what we believe the virtual tours fix.
Right.
Yes.
Expectation versus reality.
Exactly. And as long as you have the right expectation going in as a camper, 9 out of 10 times you're going to be just fine, right? You're not going to be as upset as you would have been if you thought you booked a premium site and you showed up and it wasn't the picture you saw online and things like that. So managing the guest expectation is also why we haven't really varied from what Jen had said, is the comprehensive coverage of the campground, because it's very important to the camper.
Very. And, managing that expectation also means that the reviews will not be as bad as if,
Right.
so, I mean, that's in itself is gold,
Hmm.
absolute gold into a business owner.
Right.
Wow.
It
Very
is.
cool. What about state run? I went through your map and I couldn't find any state run campgrounds.
So that we have not had the bandwidth to go down that road yet, right? So as we've been building this business, once you get to the state and federal side, there's a lot more red tape to go through and hoops to jump through. It's on our, plan to do, especially as we get more and more help within the business doing the various aspects of that. We can free up to focus on more of those things. So we have talked to more, I wouldn't say state run, but like city and county
Okay.
entities, which, that I think will parlay into more of the state run stuff. So we're kind of starting at the state or the city and county level, and then looking to work up from there.
Good. I think it would be very nice to see state and national campgrounds and have a full tour.
I agree.
I like staying at them, and I wish I could see the sites. So,
Yes.
I mean, you're definitely poised to be the two individuals who make that happen. So, good. When a campground changes, so you've had them as an account now for 2 or 3 years. You're working on their back end on everything. How do you update your system when they add 5 new sites or they completely renovate their sites?
You handle that one?
Oh, well, yeah. Most of the times, if it's a small update, as you suggested, we'll send them the camera and have them take the pictures in their own time and send it back to us. And then it's easy for us to swap out those 5-10 pictures.
Sure.
And the tour never goes down. No one ever notices that it's changing, and just take care of it.
For the larger ones, say they added 50 sites, we'll bring that local photographer back out, have them refilm, add it back in. And because it's all photo based, we don't have to start from scratch. All we have to do is go switch out the pictures for the areas that have changed and add in what's new, and then update the interactive map to include those. So I will say in the 4 years we've run the business so far, we haven't had a lot of major changes, but we've been bringing on, parks slowly. So coming into 25, I know we have a lot of updates that are going to be happening to clients who are finishing renovations or have added different sites or cabins or cottages, whatever it may be. So I know this year we're going to do a lot more of those type of updates where, we have probably 10 or 15 clients that have done it so far. I think that number is going to be a lot more. Obviously, the more parks we bring on.
Sure. Is it easy?
Yeah.
I mean, and when I say easy, when you mentioned a very big change, it's still very easy.
Yeah, it's no different than setting up a new tour filming, right? So the logistics we have to put in on the front end of filming are very much the same. Is all we have to do is pull the previous, notes we had on the client and then add on to how we're going to index this new site. So a lot of the effort goes in beforehand. So that way the on-site and the editing are much simpler. And then we try to have, the same person working on the tour to build it. If they built the last one, to have them build the changes as well. That way they're familiar, because in the same regard, I may not know any of this park and have to add new pictures in. If I have somebody that's a little familiar who built the last one, then they can add that in, and it's pretty simple for them to, get up to speed on the park.
Sure. Totally makes sense. Is there anything that I haven't covered that you would like to talk about, or you at least want the listeners to know about Campsite360?
Like you had mentioned, all the virtual tours that are on our website are for everybody to use. We don't have a membership program or anything like that. We want to drive business to our website, campsite360.com, and people can browse all the sites and all the amenities of every campground that we have on our map.
Good for you. Again, like I did find some competitors, or a competitor that does not do it that way. And had I not known about you and I was looking at the two different, virtual tour platforms, I immediately would turn away from anyone who asked for my email address just to look at, a tour of a campground. So you again are poised to be ahead because you've put the consumer first.
And it's crazy, like talking about this now too, because that was the whole reason we started, right? We had an issue. We booked a site, said there's got to be a better way to do this. And from day one, that was the goal. It was building what we needed as a platform, right? How do I want to see where I'm going to go? How do I want to see what I'm going to book? And that's been the whole focus. And the reason we chose the route we did is because this also benefits the campground a lot by driving more traffic and more conversions. And we know these things happen. Back to, we're going to be able to better manage. We're going to be able to better measure those in the future. But this is really, I'm showing this campground, why shouldn't it be fully branded with them, right? It's their marketing. We're going to drive traffic to them, but it's benefiting the camper who's coming in, right? So it's a win-win for everybody in this. The campground gets a fully indexed virtual tour of their whole park and all their amenities, and the camper gets to see all of those before they arrive and know where they're going to go park their rig. So keeping our needs as the focus is exactly what we try to do, because we are the campers as well. Traveling around the country, there's lots of things that I wish would change about the whole process, and we're going to try to change those because it's going to help everybody.
It is. And I would be willing to bet, TJ, that the more campgrounds that start to use your service, the other campgrounds are going to feel obligated to clean up their act, because we've all been to campgrounds where we feel that they're absolutely inferior. And as they lose more and more business because they're not using something like this and they're not keeping their image up to par, that they're going to have this obligation to better themselves. In other words, you're going to make campgrounds, all of them, the tide is going to rise them all up to the top.
And that's what we all want, right?
Yep.
We all want great parks. Yes. So, and it is funny too, because we do get a lot of referrals from our current clients, but they're not given to us by our current clients. They go on, it might be a competitor down the road. They're like, we saw you did this at this park. That's what we need. We need this.
And they're neighboring parks.
Right. So when one does it, they see the value of it. And they're like, oh, that's what we need. It's beautiful. It's amazing. We need that for our park too.
Exactly. I'm not surprised. So exactly, that tide rises and all of them come up because they have to take advantage of your service. As I was going,
I was just going to say, it's just like years ago before there were booking softwares and you had to pick up the phone and call to make a reservation. Well, now if I'm searching online and there's not a booking software, I just close the window and go to the next one. Like, technology is evolving and you can tell which campgrounds are getting on board with it.
Jan, I'm glad you said that, because I can't tell you how many times I would find a campground and it was just a phone number. And I'm like, we're on our way there. I need this booked quickly. Yeah. So I'm not going to wait for somebody maybe picking up the phone. So yeah, right. I would just move on to the next campground if they did not have the booking software. So at this point, if I can't tour the park with your service, then I'm not going to book that campground. And all of our listeners should probably do the same thing. As I went through, there was always one of those things, because, before you guys have a fifth wheel. I had a bumper pull travel trailer. I was 50 feet in length. And sometimes, it was like, I know that they say this site is 55 feet long, but what does it look like? Can I see it measured? Is there a way to put a graduated measurement system in? I know this is like, I'm imagining this is like the perfect situation where you tour 360, you see, I know sometimes they have like a fifth wheel in them and you can tell that they're going to fit, but some of them are vacant. If it had like a ruler, graduated ruler along the pavement, that would be amazing.
So eventually we're going to do a little better. So all of those details can be easily added into the tour for every single site. The issue and the reason why they're not right now is because then the owner has to maintain that data in a booking software, then in the tour. So there's multiple places, and that complicated things to the point to where we leave it to the campground to choose, do you want that info in or do you not?
Okay.
As we do more integrations, all of that data is housed in the booking software, and we'll be able to pull that over and display it on every site. So that will be happening soon. And it's possible with what the integrations we've done so far, but we're going to make that standard that we're going to pull that information over. So when you look at the site, you'll know what tier category it is. If it's a premium or preferred site, you'll know how long it is, the hookups that are available there, and everything. So we'll put all of that into the tour as well.
Beautiful. Oh, I can almost see a premium feature for the campground in your service. The top tier, the absolute best that you can get from you guys is we'll put a circle on where the utilities are. We'll put a circle where this, we'll put the ruler down there so that everybody can see every option of that campsite. And that would be the top tier. That will cost that campground more money, of course, but it certainly sets them apart.
For sure. And if that's a lot of the funny one I'm trying to figure out is how do we figure out like Starlink and satellite availability, right? So with the tour, you can see if there's something covering the site, but being able to show north and south, right? Where's north and south? Do I know if it's going to set up or not? So we're doing some of that with our interactive maps and kind of the ability to tell which direction's what. But there's lots of ideas to continue growing this and adding all of those things that people want, right? It's the reason review sites exist, is because you want to know somebody else stayed there. Can I get satellite at this site, right? And it's funny too, because we'll see people walking around sites, and we did this in Michigan last year. This older couple was going around, they were riding their bikes, and they had a piece of paper, and they would go to a site and they'd pull out his phone and they'd turn and they would look to see if they could get satellite coverage. So I go up and I asked them, they're like, yeah, they told us they were going to put us in the site and it was going to support our satellite TV. It doesn't, it's blocked. We can't. So now we're taking our own notes to remember what sites to book when we come back. And it's like, that's the whole reason we exist, right? You shouldn't have to do that on site. That information should be given to you to make an informed decision on where you're going to stay.
Oh, absolutely brilliant. You have so much growth to go. This is going to be endless for you. I was like, what happens when they run out of campgrounds? Now I see that there is still expansion that can happen. Fantastic.
Yep. I'm addicted to learning. So there's always something that's going to be learning next.
The insatiable appetite to learn. I understand and I live the life. Yes, absolutely. So where can all of our listeners find everything about you guys?
Campsite360.com and also Campsite360 on Instagram and Facebook.
Beautiful. I, of course, will put those links in the description like everyone does in a podcast. So I really enjoyed this conversation, and I can't tell you how excited I am for this business. I wish I had come up with this idea. So much fun.
Well, thank you. It's been great to talk to you.
Absolutely. Again, listeners, thank you for listening. And Jen, TJ, it has been a real pleasure.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
What a great entrepreneurial mindset they both have. My favorite insight that they shared was to always keep the end user at the forefront of the business model. In other words, build the system with empathy for the customer. And with the two of them at the helm, Campsite360 will be a very real success story. You can learn more about Jen and TJ and Campsite360 on their website, campsite360.com. The links are in the show notes. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, and I wish you all very well.
We weren't going to grow quickly knowing that we can't be everywhere.
RVing is more than just a hobby. It's a community. When you join RV Life, you're not just gaining access to a suite of tools. You're becoming part of a vibrant community of fellow RV enthusiasts. Share your experiences, learn from others, and make your RV journey even more memorable. Visit RVLife.com to become a part of our community and start making connections that last a lifetime.